What makes movies so magical? Discover the enchantment of cinema and what makes movies so magical. From iconic film scores to breathtaking cinematography, we delve into the world of movie magic, exploring the elements that transport us to new worlds, evoke powerful emotions, and leave a lasting impact on our lives. So, whether you're a film buff, a casual viewer, or simply someone who loves the art of storytelling like I do, Backstory Movies is for you. Join us as we uncover the secrets behind the magic of movies and celebrate the art form that has captivated audiences for generations. Get ready to be spellbound by the wonder of cinema and find out what makes movies so magical. So get your tickets, grab your popcorn, shop the merch, and get ready for a new cinema in movie storytelling at Backstory Movies. Visit our website at backstorymovies.com, where movies are an adventure, and shop the merch at Creativity is Expression.
You know, Hollywood has this obsession, a really deep, abiding love affair with the stories of gods and monsters and demigods.
Mm.
Every single summer, it feels like we get another wave of them, right? Legendary heroes crashing onto our screens.
It's a constant.
But the thing is, this isn't some new thing that just started with CGI. What we're seeing today is really it's the continuation of the world's oldest storytelling tradition.
Just through its newest medium.
Exactly. And this relationship, it goes all the way back. I mean, we're talking silent films featuring Hercules way before we even had sound in movies.
And that's really the perfect setup for this deep dive. Our mission today is, well, it's very focused. We want to understand the fundamental physics of why these ancient stories collide so perfectly with the machinery of modern cinema.
Right.
And beyond just the box office, we're going to dig into what lessons the best adaptations and, just as importantly, the biggest failures teach us about storytelling itself.
The staying power is
Yeah.
it's incredible. These myths are thousands of years old. They started as oral traditions, then got written on scrolls, and now they're in 4K, distributed globally in seconds. It just begs the question, what is that magnetic appeal? Why do we keep going back to Troy or Olympus or Asgard?
It's because mythology comes preloaded.
Yeah.
It has all the greatest hits of the human condition already baked in. You're talking about universal themes, right? Love, betrayal, heroism, hubris. These things have already proven they work over millennia. So when a filmmaker adapts, say, The Odyssey, they aren't starting from a blank page.
They're tapping into something that's already in our cultural DNA.
Precisely. They don't have to convince you that fate versus free will matters. The stories did that work for them thousands of years ago. It's like the ultimate narrative shortcut.
Okay, so let's unpack that, the idea of adaptation, because that's where the creative choices and sometimes the compromises really start to show. Why is mythology so uniquely flexible for a filmmaker compared to, say, adapting a beloved book or a historical event?
Well, the beauty of myth is that there's no single authoritative text.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're making a film about a real historical person, you are bound by facts, dates, events.
You have historians fact-checking you.
Exactly. You have rails you have to stay on. And if you adapt a book everyone loves, you're constrained by that source text. Change too much, and the fans will let you know.
They will riot.
They will. But mythology, it's amorphous. It was designed to be retold, to be changed over time.
So the filmmaker gets the brand names, basically. The recognizable characters, the core themes, but the details are all up for grabs.
100%. Think about it. The specific details of Zeus's various transformations or the exact number of Hercules' labors, these things were never standardized.
Right, because nobody's going to stand up and fact-check whether Zeus actually turned into a swan.
That's the creative freedom they get. And it's so important because it lets them explore contemporary themes. They can talk about our modern anxieties, social issues, politics, but through this safe, ancient lens of a demigod's journey. It's cultural commentary disguised as a blockbuster.
But that flexibility, that freedom, brings us to what you could call the spectacle paradox. When Hollywood gets its hands on a myth, the first instinct is always to go bigger, flashier, more CGI.
Always.
But the analysis we've seen suggests the best mythological films. They aren't always the biggest ones.
And that paradox is perfectly illustrated if you compare the 1981 Clash of the Titans with the 2010 remake.
Okay.
The original feels almost charmingly quaint now. It relied on Ray Harryhausen's stop-motion effects, and because the tech was limited, they had to be so creative.
Right. They had to focus on the story.
Yes. There's something so pure about that approach to Perseus's journey. The focus is on fate and destiny and the human scale of his struggle against these impossible odds.
And the 2010 version.
It was the complete opposite. It was drowning in CGI, overwhelming 3D gimmicks, just a relentless pace. It maximized spectacle at every single turn, and yet it felt so much less magical, less compelling. Definitely less memorable than the one that was 30 years older.
So what does it tell us? Why did the technically inferior film actually capture the essence better?
It shows, I think, pretty unequivocally that spectacle alone can't capture the mythic essence. The staying power of these stories isn't technical, it's thematic. The second you shift focus entirely to showing off your rendering budget, the giant kraken, the shiny armor, you lose the human struggle.
You lose the hubris, the moral choices.
All of it. The constraints of stop motion in the 81 version actually forced them to focus on story, on character. The magic was in the narrative gaps that your imagination had to fill, not in having every scale on the monster perfectly rendered for you.
And we should just stress again, this isn't a new problem. This push and pull between spectacle and story goes back to the very beginning of cinema. Like we said, silent films with Hercules. It shows the core visual appeal was always there, even before dialogue could explain what was happening. A demigod lifting a boulder, that's a universal language.
It absolutely is.
So if we look at the whole landscape of mythology in movies today, one region just completely dominates Hollywood's attention. Let's start there. In their favorite playground, Greek mythology.
Oh yeah, Greek myths are the champions for a few very clear reasons. First, they're inherently dramatic. The heroes are flawed, they're powerful, they're easy to cast. They're also, surprisingly sexy.
And the dysfunction.
And the dysfunction. The source material we looked at said the drama on Olympus would make the Kardashians blush, and it's true. The infidelity, the jealousy, the fights between parents and children, it is instant, high-stakes drama. It's ready-made for the screen.
And because that well is so deep, filmmakers have tried all sorts of different approaches. Let's take Troy from 2004. They made a hugely controversial choice.
Huge.
They just stripped the gods out entirely. They presented Homer's Iliad as pure historical fiction.
And that decision, it caused massive debates. Purists were furious. But from a storytelling perspective, it's fascinating. By removing divine intervention, by saying a god isn't causing this plague or swaying this battle, the film has to confront purely human motivations.
It all comes down to pride and lust and revenge, not the gods playing with puppets.
Exactly. The tragedy becomes entirely our fault as humans. And it completely changes the main character, doesn't it?
It has to. How does Achilles change when he's no longer a nearly invincible demigod?
Well, Brad Pitt's Achilles becomes less of a magical weapon and more of a man who is grappling with mortality and his own legacy. His fate becomes his choice, driven by his ego, not something dictated from on high by Zeus. It forces you to engage with the moral weight of what these people are doing at the walls of Troy.
Okay, so that's one approach, stripping it down. But then you have something like the Percy Jackson franchise, which does the exact opposite. It leans into the fantasy completely.
Right, that's the modern transplant approach, and it's really effective, especially for younger audiences. The premise itself is it's so clever. You take all the Greek gods and monsters and you drop them into modern America.
And the justification for that is brilliant.
It is. The idea that the gods move their home to wherever Western civilization's heart beats strongest. So Mount Olympus isn't in Greece anymore. It's floating above the Empire State Building.
Which is such a smart way of saying that the core myths of the West still live in its cultural and financial centers.
Exactly. It makes it instantly relatable to kids who know New York and summer camps. It's just a fantastic mechanism for updating ancient lore without losing the magic.
Before we leave the Greeks, we have to talk about the Wonder Woman films, because they seem to build a perfect bridge between that ancient mythic world and our own gritty historical reality.
They do. It's a masterful integration. The movies ground Diana's origins so deeply in Greek mythology, the island of Themyscira, the Amazons, all of that. But then they throw her into these very specific, very real historical moments.
World War I, the 1980s.
Right. And Wonder Woman uses mythology as a metaphor, really. A metaphor for human potential. It shows that these ancient ideals, truth, heroism, love, are still totally relevant when they come up against modern cynicism and warfare. It's a seamless connection.
So if Greek myth is the long-reigning champion, Norse mythology is definitely the comeback kid, and we can thank Marvel's Thor franchise for that, almost single-handedly.
Oh, absolutely. It was a massive cultural renaissance. Before 2011, names like Odin and Loki, I mean, they were pretty niche. Now they're household names across the entire globe.
But to do that, Marvel took enormous liberties. I mean, sweeping changes.
Colossal ones. They changed the fundamental nature of the myths. The gods aren't magical beings anymore. They're super advanced aliens from another dimension. Asgard isn't a divine realm. It's a floating sci-fi city.
So how then, if you change that much, how does it still capture the essence of Norse cosmology? What is that essence?
That's the key question. The essence they kept is centered on a few really authentic Norse themes. First, the emphasis on fate, on destiny. The idea of Ragnarok, the end of the world, is always there. It's not something you can stop. It's a cycle you have to endure.
And sacrifice.
And sacrifice, yes.
Yeah.
That's central to Odin's character.
Yeah.
And they kept the idea of a structured cosmos, the different realms connected. But I think what they really understood, which other adaptations maybe missed, was the humor.
We tend to think of mythology as being so serious and solemn.
But the original Norse myths were wild. They were absurd adventures. They were meant to be entertaining, not just theological texts.
And the sources gave some great examples of this.
Fantastic examples. You had the story of Thor having to cross-dress to get his hammer back. I mean, picture the god of thunder in a wedding gown, pretending to be a goddess, just to trick a giant.
It immediately makes these larger-than-life figures more
Human.
religious.
It does. And then you have Loki, who transforms into a mare, seduces a giant's horse, and then gives birth to Odin's eight-legged steed, Sleipnir. That level of absurdity and playfulness is actually part of the original fabric, and Marvel was smart enough to lean into it.
So in the end, the Thor films work because they embrace both sides of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
The cosmic end-of-the-world scale and the pity family drama.
Exactly. That dynamic between Thor, Loki, and Odin, the rivalry, the fight for their father's approval, the betrayal, that's the emotional glue. That feels completely authentic to the source material's focus on kinship. The family squabbles, even on a rainbow bridge, are the most human part of the story.
Okay, so Hollywood has mined Greece and Scandinavia pretty thoroughly. But there's this entire world of narrative that remains, for the most part, unexplored in the West. We have to talk about Eastern mythologies.
We absolutely have to. This is such a critical point. Eastern mythologies represent this massive missed opportunity for new stories, but at the same time, they're a minefield of cultural sensitivity issues that you have to navigate very, very carefully.
Why is adapting a Chinese deity fundamentally different from adapting Zeus? What are the stakes?
It comes down to this concept of a living tradition. When you adapt the Greek gods, their religion has been defunct for 2,000 years. They're cultural artifacts.
Great stories, but nobody's actively worshiping them.
Right. But for millions of people across Asia, these stories we're about to discuss are not just fun adventures. They still inform active religious practice, spiritual beliefs, cultural identity. So when you adapt a living tradition, the level of respect and care required is just exponentially higher.
Let's start with Chinese mythology. The sources say these tales have an epic scope that dwarfs anything in Western tradition.
The scale is staggering. I mean, just think about the stories around Sun Wukong, the Monkey King from Journey to the West. It's not just a travel story. It's a deep, philosophical, spiritual quest for enlightenment, full of trials and demons. And they've been adapted countless times in Asian cinema, which shows how robust they are.
And we've seen some of those adaptations make it over here, like Stephen Chow's film from 2013.
Which is a fantastic example. It shows how you can modernize these stories, make them funny and visually exciting, but still respect their cultural and spiritual weight. Chow has his slapstick style, but the core journey of self-discovery is still there. It proves you can update without erasing.
The Japanese mythology, that seems to pop up more often in the West, but usually through a very specific lens.
The horror genre.
The horror genre.
Yeah, because the elements of Japanese folklore with ghosts and demons, the yokai, they fit so neatly into what Western horror wants. But when filmmakers try to tackle the broader stuff, the historical sagas, the Shinto kami, the results are mixed.
Like 47 Ronin.
A perfect example of a noble failure. It tried to blend samurai history with demons and magic, and it just didn't work. It shows how hard it is for an outside production to get that balance right.
And then you get films that just strip mine various Asian mythologies for cool-looking characters.
And that's maybe the biggest insult. You look at movies like Mortal Kombat, They borrow names and aesthetics from Chinese and Japanese folklore, but they reduce these incredibly complex deities and demons, beings with deep philosophical roles, into
Video game bosses.
exactly just a video game boss battle. All the cultural context, the moral ambiguity, it's all sacrificed for a cool action sequence. A god just becomes an obstacle for the hero to punch.
And finally, let's turn to Indian mythology. We have the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, two of the most important epic poems in human history. And yet, they almost never appear in mainstream Western films.
And when they do, it's usually just as exotic window dressing. That absence says so much about Hollywood's blind spots. The Mahabharata, for instance, is one of the longest epic poems in the world. It's full of moral ambiguity, complex characters, deep philosophy.
It's not a simple good versus evil story.
Not at all. The core conflict is a catastrophic war between cousins. It's deeply personal and ethically messy. The heroes are flawed. The villains have moments of nobility. It's all about this concept of dharma, or duty, where following one code means violating another. There are no easy choices.
And that's what Hollywood misses, the philosophical depth.
They miss the gray area. They see the armies and the divine weapons and think, great CGI battle. But they miss the profound ethical cost of the war. To do those stories justice, you have to commit to their complexity. And historically, Hollywood has struggled with that when it comes to non-Western narratives. They want a clear good guy and a clear bad guy.
So it's clear the standard 2-hour blockbuster has its limits. Let's look at other mediums that have done a better job, maybe because they have more room to breathe, starting with animation.
Animation has a huge advantage. It gives you immediate creative and visual freedom without the pressure of realism or casting big stars in togas.
And the classic example of that freedom is Disney's Hercules. It took massive liberties with the myths.
Massive, unapologetic liberties. It was charming and musical and very, very far from the dark, tragic originals.
But it worked.
It worked because it was self-aware. By embracing humor and a pop art style, it openly acknowledged it was a retelling. It didn't pretend to be a serious, reverent adaptation, so it avoided that trap. The characters were intentionally softened for a modern audience.
Then you have the perfect counterexample, Moana, which showed how you can use animation to create something new while being incredibly respectful of the source tradition.
Moana's success came from its process. That's the model for the future. Disney worked closely from the very beginning with Polynesian cultural advisors, historians, and storytellers.
So they didn't just borrow the characters.
No, they collaborated. That's why the film honors Pacific Island mythology so well, especially the character of Maui. They crafted a new story, but they introduced a global audience to a real mythological figure with genuine care. It proved you can educate and entertain at the same time.
We also have to mention Studio Ghibli. They create entirely new myths that feel ancient.
Oh, films like Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away are masterpieces. They draw so authentically from Shinto traditions and Japanese folklore, the reverence for nature, the existence of spirits, that they blur the line between old folklore and new cinematic myth. They feel like they could have been told 1,000 years ago.
And animation isn't just for lighter fare. DreamWorks proved it can handle very serious religious material.
Absolutely. The Prince of Egypt. It tackled the story of Moses and the Exodus with such sophistication and respect. It didn't shy away from the darkness in the story. It proved that animation can be a powerful, serious tool for the most complex and sensitive narratives.
So if animation gives you visual freedom, modern TV gives you the gift of time. A 2-hour movie has to simplify, but a 10-episode season can dive deep.
That extended runtime is a complete game changer. It gives you space to explore all the complexities a film has to cut. You can show the mundane lives of demigods. You can give backstories to minor characters. Mythology needs time to build its world, and TV provides that time.
What are the best examples of that?
Well, you have American Gods, which brought Neil Gaiman's sprawling world to life, the clash between old gods like Odin and new gods like media and technology. That story needed 10 hours just to set the stage.
And Good Omens?
Another great one. Playing with biblical myth and the apocalypse through comedy and philosophy, it gives so much breathing room to the relationship at its core. And then you have shows like Netflix's Blood of Zeus, which create brand new stories within the established Greek framework. They aren't just retelling Perseus, they're deepening the lore.
Okay, now for the most provocative idea in our sources, the argument that superhero movies, they are our modern mythology.
You have to dissect this. Before anyone dismisses it, you have to look at the parallels. They are explicit.
Okay.
At their core, these are stories about beings with godlike powers navigating very human conflicts. Morality, responsibility, fate.
And it all starts with the origin story, the
Yeah.
transformation.
Which is the classic hero's journey, just repackaged for the 21st century. A mortal is transformed into something more, just like a demigod being born to a god and a mortal. They face epic battles for the fate of the world. And the shared universes, the MCU and DC, they function exactly like a contemporary pantheon of gods.
This idea of a modern pantheon is really interesting. How does that play out in our culture?
Look at how fluid the stories are. A character like Iron Man or Batman has multiple versions across comics, films, games. That mirrors how a myth about Poseidon might have been slightly different in Athens versus Sparta. And think about the heated, almost theological debates we have online about casting or costumes or character changes.
Right.
Those are the modern versions of ancient arguments about the correct telling of a myth. We treat these characters with a kind of reverence.
And the ultimate case study for merging old mythic structure with a new superhero genre has to be Black Panther.
It's a masterpiece of modern myth-making because it explicitly connected the superhero stuff, the suit, the tech, Wakanda, with authentic African traditions and futurism. It tapped into universal mythic themes: ancestry, tradition, leadership. The ancestral plane is literally a connection to a spiritual pantheon. It proved the mythic foundation is incredibly powerful when you treat it with cultural specificity and respect.
We've talked a lot about the successes,
Mm.
but to really understand this, we have to look at the failures. Let's get into the cautionary tales.
And we have to start with the most spectacular failure in recent memory: Gods of Egypt. That film is a perfect case study in how not to do this.
What were the fatal flaws there?
It failed on every level: respect, depth, and casting. First, the widespread criticism about whitewashing Egyptian deities was completely justified. Second, it reduced this incredibly complex theology with all its ideas about life and the afterlife to a simple video game plot.
Boss battles and action sequences.
Exactly. It was a total failure of imagination and, more importantly, a failure of respect. It missed everything that makes Egyptian mythology so fascinating.
Then you have the films that look amazing but are completely hollow inside, like Immortals.
Immortals is the definition of style over substance. It was all about beautiful visuals, slow-motion fights, golden armor. It looked great in the trailer, but the myth itself was hollowed out. There was no thematic weight, no moral exploration. It just proves that pretty pictures are not enough. The story got lost.
And of course, Hollywood just keeps trying and failing with Hercules. We had multiple attempts in the 2010s alone.
And they showed all the different ways you can fail the same material, whether it was too gritty and realistic or too campy and fun. They all missed the essential tragedy and triumph of his story. His labors aren't just strength tests. They're about penance and atonement. He suffers. Most adaptations just focus on the muscles, not the soul.
So looking ahead, where does mythological cinema go from here? What are the next steps?
I think as global audiences get more connected, the potential is for films that cross cultural boundaries entirely. And I don't just mean a simple versus movie, Thor versus Ra.
Right.
I mean thoughtful explorations of how different cultures understand divinity and heroism. How do their worldviews clash and synthesize? That's really fertile ground.
So the lesson is always the same. Story over technology.
Always.
Yeah.
Technology serves the story, not the other way around. The power isn't in the CGI monster. It's in exploring our humanity through these superhuman characters. And the other key is diversity, not just in casting, but behind the camera. We need more voices from within these living traditions bringing their own stories to the screen.
So after all of this, why do these stories still matter so much to us now in our, rational digital age?
They serve this unique and essential cultural function. In a world that's increasingly secular, these films provide a safe communal space to explore the big questions, meaning purpose, transcendence, but without the baggage that can sometimes come with organized religion.
They let us imagine being more than we are, while also reminding us of our flaws.
And they connect us. They're an anchor to a tradition that's older than recorded history. The best films understand these stories survived because they speak to something unchanging in us. Love, pride, fate versus free will. These themes resonate whether the characters are in togas or superhero spandex.
They remind us that people have always struggled with the same questions we do.
Exactly. How do we live a meaningful life? What do we owe our community? How do we face mortality? These are the eternal questions.
That is a really profound way to wrap this all up. We've seen how the flexibility of myth allows for everything from the human drama of Troy to the family comedy of Thor. We've seen the brilliance of respectful adaptations like Moana and modern myth-making like Black Panther, and the absolute necessity of looking beyond the usual Greek and Norse stories.
And in the end, mythology doesn't give us easy answers to those questions. What it gives us is the framework, the characters, the scale for us to explore them together generation after generation. And even when they're filtered through Hollywood, that essential spark of the divine, the monstrous, and the beautifully messy human part, it always survives.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. If superhero cinema really is our modern mythology, then who is in our new pantheon? Which characters from the last decade will be remembered in 500 years? And what universal human truth will their myth, the story of Tony Stark or Wonder Woman or maybe even someone from a video game, be telling future generations about who we were and what we cared about today?
It's something to think about next time the credits roll on a blockbuster, knowing you're part of the world's oldest storytelling tradition.
Until the next deep dive, we'll see you then.